Once upon a time, there was an enchanted forest. In this forest, there lived 5 princesses, each beautiful in her own unique way. In this forest, there also lived many frogs, frogs of every size, color, and shape. Frogs were everywhere, and they croaked all day and all night. Each princess lived in her own cottage, quite some distance apart. Once a week, they gathered for lunch, taking turns being the hostess. Traveling to visit each other was quite an ordeal because of all the frogs along the way. There were frogs in the pathways, causing the princesses to step around them. There were frogs in the bushes and in the trees, making the princesses fearful the frogs would jump out at them. Every rock seemed to have a frog on it, and the princesses felt they were being stared at as they passed by. When gathered for lunch, they always spent the first half hour or so complaining about the frogs. They complained about how ugly and slimy they were, how they were everywhere, always underfoot, how they stared, and how noisy they were with that awful croaking. Something else they complained about was how there were absolutely no princes in the forest. Not one. They had all been hoping to meet a prince so they could marry one day, but none had ever seen one. Now occasionally, their lunch would turn into a slumber party. On one of those occasions, when evening came and it was time for bed, the hostess gave each princess blankets and pillows, where they set them around the fireplace in the cozy living room. The princesses tucked themselves in, and after talking for a while, one by one, each nodded off to sleep. After they had been asleep for a while, a mysterious golden light began to fill the room. Little delicate fairies, glowing from within, could be seen everywhere. They were on the sofas and chairs, on the tables and bookshelves, even on top of the lamps. Once the fairies were settled comfortably, the fairy godmother of them all entered the room glowing more brightly than all the others. She took her place on the mantel and began to tell a story to the 5 sleeping princesses. She told them that all living creatures have a heart, and it wasn't fair to judge them by how they looked, how they acted, or how they spoke. She explained that it was necessary to look into the hearts of all the creatures to truly know them, and frogs were no different. When the princesses woke in the morning, the fairies were gone. As they told each other what they dreamed, they were mystified how they could all have exactly the same dream. At breakfast, they were silent as each mused over what had occurred. Then they hugged and kissed each other on the cheek and set off for home. As they walked along the pathways to their cottages, they saw the frogs, but this time they stopped. They remembered the dream and looked into the heart of each frog. The frogs were no longer just a bunch of green, slimy creatures. They were unique and individual, and this time the princesses didn't mind the frogs staring at them from the rocks along the way. In their cottages, the princesses began to have favorite frogs. They invited them into their homes and shared meals with them. One day, a frog was visiting one of the princesses. The princess sat down to enjoy some tea and began to talk to the frog. The frog sat quietly on the table, occasionally flicking a passing fly with his tongue. The princess was so terribly pleased to have someone who listened so politely that she picked up the frog, smiled, and kissed it on the top of its head. With that, all of a sudden, there stood a smiling prince, his eyes twinkling boyishly. Who are you?" the amazed princess sputtered. "I'm the prince you've been hoping would come and love you. I've been waiting for your heart to open. It wasn't until you could accept the frogs just as they are that I could come to you. Now that you know how to look past the surface and see into the hearts of all the creatures of the forest, you will be able to experience real love." The princess, still quite amazed and a little befuddled, said, But how? Why? What has caused this to happen?" "Do you remember the night you and the other princesses shared the same dream? Well, it wasn't a dream. It was the fairies. Fairies are pure love, and they want you to experience the love you are longing for. But they knew it could never happen until you could see into the hearts of the frogs. So they invited the fairy godmother to come and help. Once you began to look into the hearts of the frogs, you were able to see past the surface and enjoy them as the unique individuals they are. And that's the only way that true love can occur. Then the prince walked over to the princess, lifted her chin, and ever so gently kissed her on the lips. As she gazed up into his eyes, he smiled and said, "You can thank the fairies."